夠法定人數。
We have a quorum, so I call to order this meeting for the panel on housing, and let's invite the administration in order to save time. Item 1 on the agenda, information papers issued since last meeting. Since the last meeting, the Secretariat has issued the following papers. LC paper number CB bracket 1237/1314 bracket 01. Land Registry Statistics for October 2013 provided by the administration. Second paper, LC paper number CB bracket 1241/1213 bracket 01. Referral memorandum from the Public Complaints Office of the Legislative Secretariat regarding the request for shelving the policy on transfer of under-occupation households in public housing estates. Welcome, representatives of the administration. So this paper is on policy on transfer of your households in public housing estates. This item has been put on the items for discussion. And the third paper, LC paper number CB bracket 1306/1213 bracket 01, which is a letter from Wong Kwok-hing, Chairman of the Panel on Housing, to the Secretary for Transport and Housing regarding the closed drying racks in public housing estates. The administration has proposed to discuss this item. That is, recently we have read about a fatal accident involving laundry poles. So these are information papers. Items for discussion at the next meeting. Would members please refer to the two papers, CB bracket 1411/1314 bracket 01 and bracket 02, which are a list of outstanding items for discussion and list of follow-up actions. At the next meeting, which is scheduled for the 6th of January 2014, Monday, 2:30 p.m., 3 items are proposed by the administration for discussion. The first one is the work of the Sales of First 10 Residential Properties Authority. The second item, proposed creation of directorate posts in the Housing Department for coping with the additional workload arising from the new public housing production targets. And the third item, replacement of laundry poles holders to laundry racks in public rental flats. So do members agree to the 3 items to be discussed at the next meeting? If there are no other views, then let's proceed as discussed. Item 3 on the agenda, Public Housing Construction Program 2013-14 to 2017-18. LC paper number CB bracket 1411/1314 bracket 03. That's administration's paper on Public Housing Construction Program 2013-14 to 2017-18. And also LC paper number CB bracket 1411/1314 bracket 04, which is the updated background brief on Public Housing Construction Program prepared by the Legislative Secretariat. So, may I welcome representatives from the Housing Department to this meeting. We have Mr. Duncan Pascott, Permanent Secretary for Transport and Housing, and Ms. Ada Fong, Deputy Director, Development, Construction, Housing Department, and Mr. Harry Chan, Chief Planning Officer of Housing Department. So, may I invite Mr. Pascott to take us through this paper.
A few opening remarks, then I'll ask Ada to take us through the PowerPoint to expand on what I'm going to say. Mr. Chairman, this paper sets out the Housing Authority's Public Housing Construction Programme for the period 2013-14 to 2017-18. With the concerted efforts of various departments, the government has identified sufficient land to provide about 179,000 public rental housing units from the period 2012-13 to 2021-22 to meet the 2013 policy addressed flat production target. According to the Housing Authority's 5-year rolling public housing construction program, there will be a total public rental housing production of about 82,000 flats in the 5-year period from 2013-14 to 2017-18. For the home ownership scheme flats, the first batch of about 2,200 flats located in Sha Tin, Tsuen Wan, Kwai Ching and Yuen Long will be completed in 2016-17. Construction on these sites has already commenced. In addition, Housing Authority has successfully worked with other government departments and bureaux to identify suitable sites for home ownership scheme development in different areas of the territory to ensure that a total of about 17,000 home ownership scheme units will be completed from 2016-17 to 2019-20 in accordance with the government's commitments. I must stress that the construction programme is dynamic in nature and something that we keep under constant review. Progress on individual sites will depend on a number of factors such as land availability, site constraints, technical issues and other factors. In fact, we also need to address various issues relating to the planning and provision of local community and transport facilities. The 5-year programme that we're providing today is based on the current information and therefore subject to change, especially those projects due for completion in the 5th year, in other words 2017-18. Projects for completion beyond the 5-year period are even more uncertain, so we're focusing on the first 5-year period. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to invite Ada to take us briefly through the presentation and expand on some of our particular information. Thank you.
Right, Ms. Ada Fong. Chairman, members, in relation to the Public Housing Construction Programme 2013-14 to 2017-18, I'd like to walk members through the paper. The objectives of the public rental housing scheme is to provide PRH to low-income families who cannot afford private rental accommodation and to maintain an average waiting time AWT for general PRH applicants at around 3 years. In the Policy Address 2013, the Chief Executive announced that the target for PRH reduction are to produce about 75,000 new PRH flats over the 5 years from 2012-13 and at least 100,000 units over the 5 years starting from 2018. For home ownership scheme HOS, the target is to provide about 17,000 HOS flats over the 4 years starting from 2016-17. And due to a number of factors such as planning, construction and resource allocation, the Housing Authority put in place the Public Housing Construction Programme, PHCP, which rolls forward on a yearly basis with suitable adjustments. Now from 2012-13 to 2016-17, in a 5-year period, the total production is about 79,000 flats, some 4,000 flats more than the target of 75,000 as announced by the CE in his policy address. And we've completed some of the flats, and according to the rolling program in 2013-14 and to 2017-18, we're going to produce about 82,000 flats in total. And between 2017-18 and 2021-22, which is a second 5-year period, with the concerted efforts of various departments, we have identified sufficient land to produce more than 100,000 flats. And the key to prompt delivery of PRH, according to forecasts, will be subject to whether we can secure development sites which have been properly zoned for residential use, or secure sites preferably which are resumed clear and informed, and sites with adequate provision of infrastructure, and also to secure the support of district councils and local communities, as well as adequate manpower in place. With these factors, we will be able to deliver promptly the targeted PRH flats. And about 52% of the PRH reduction in the coming years will be in urban areas, for extended urban 32%, and in the new territories 16%. Over 85%, that is, of the production will be in urban and extended urban districts. As for new PRH reduction from 2013-14 to 2016-17, around 90% will be 1-2-person units, 16% will be, or 25% will be 2P3 units, 1-bedroom unit 39%, and 2-bedroom units for 4 persons or about 16%. Home ownership scheme. The first batch of about 2,200 HOS flats to be completed in 2016-17, which are located in Sha Tin, Hon WONG Kwok-hing, and Yuen Long, and these sites have commenced construction.
And we'll be working closely together with the departments. And we're looking for different sites in the different areas in Hong Kong. And within the year from now to 2019, we will have the units that we will have. As for public housing development after 2018 and 19, this is subject to various factors, such as change of land use or consultation with local communities, timely availability of sites, etc. So at the present stage, it is difficult to come up with a detailed timetable, but rather this will be on a roll-forward basis with due consultation with the district councils in due course. And recently, we have a development in Sha Tin and Ma On Shan. This will include the Fo Tan and the Wo Shang Chun, as well as the Ma On Shan Road North and Ma On Shan Road South projects. We are working on some of the planning and provision of facilities. We have consulted the district councils, and they have been supportive. With the HA's public housing development, we proactively liaise with the concerned departments to improve public transport facilities and address traffic issues, to provide recreational facilities and open space, to enhance pedestrian linkage, to provide retail facilities to support the needs of local community, and also to strengthen the provision of community facilities such as elderly facilities and community halls. In order to ascertain that we have steady supply of PHR and also HOS, the Steering Committee on Land Supply, chaired by the FS, will continue to coordinate proactively the overall planning for the development and supply of land in Hong Kong for various uses and adjust land supply in response to changes in demand. And we, the HA, will further strengthen internal coordination within the government and our liaison with the respective district councils and local communities to identify suitable sites for public housing development in different areas of the territory. We will consider all suitable sites, regardless of their size, for public housing development, and will develop public housing projects under the principles of optimization of land use, maximization of cost effectiveness, and sustainability to meet the needs for public housing. The HA will actively explore all feasible ways to increase the land and manpower resources for public housing needs. And we will optimize the development potential of all available sites to make more effective use of the precious land resources and to continue to liaise closely with the government departments and strive to increase public housing supply by relaxing plot ratio and building height restrictions without compromising the living environment. Thank you very much, Ms. Ada. And we will now have a list of lecture members who will be asking questions for the first round. I'd like to know who else would like to raise your hand for the first round of questioning. If not, that will be the name list. Everyone will be limited to 4 minutes, including question and answer. Mr. Fong, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the Appendix 2 in particular, concerning 2013 to 2017 on a rolling basis. For all these separate years, the number for urban and extended urban areas for 2013 to 2014, for instance, it's 14,100 for urban and extended urban areas. But I see that it is interesting that there is only 6,300 for 2017 and 2018, and it's really in 2014 to 2015 that there is only 6,900. I'd like to know why is that a particular year where there's such a shortfall in terms of extended urban units for 2014 to 2015. And also a second question for the audit report concerning the wealthy families. There are some also the hidden or invisible well-off tenants. They are 90,000 or above. Now, you mentioned that there will be a resumption of 7,000 or above units from these tenants, well-off tenants. Can that be more? A third question. In the paper, you say that there are 115,000 applications for non-elderly single units. Are there 20 to 23 years of age applicants, let's say? These are the young people and the university graduates, for example, according to the minimum wage level, they will exceed the $10,000 limit. Let's say these young graduates going into the workplace, how will they be able to be eligible or not eligible for such applications?
That doesn't just come from well-off tenants. It comes from a whole range of different reasons. People who lose their flats because they abuse the flat. People who die, unfortunately, or move out to elderly homes. Yes, we do take some back from well-off tenants, but there are many different reasons. So it's very difficult to say exactly what, where the dominant reason is. Certainly, in terms of the well-off tenant program, we are stepping up our efforts to look at, for example, the income and asset limits. We've increased the number of people in the special unit team to look at their declarations so that we can perhaps pick up more people that fall within that well-off tenant category. But I have to say, it's quite a controversial issue because, some well-off tenants, of course, their situation at one particular point in time may change, so that within maybe a year or 6 months, they lose their job or what have you, and their circumstances change. So it's something we need to keep an eye on, but it is something we are doing. In terms of the quota and points system applicants, again, at the moment, we have a system of quota and points which is based on the number of years that the individual is on the waiting list and their age. We do not discriminate against age. In other words, we don't take points off. Although I can say at the Public Accounts Committee recently there was a suggestion from one of the members that we do that, but this is not something we have taken on board just yet. Having said that, the long-term housing strategy has also recommended we look at what they call rationalizing the QPS system to see if we can get rid of people who really will never be eligible and perhaps shouldn't be on that list. Perhaps Ada can deal very briefly with the question of the extended urban area.
Because the land site is uneven for sites available for public housing. And every project will have to be different in the areas, whether it is in the urban area or new territories, and therefore every year it will be different in terms of the total supply of land in the urban or even in the new territories. Mr. Leung Yu-chung, the paper as maintained by the HA for the longest time, that 3 years would be the limit for the waiting. I have always questioned that figure, 3 years. In fact, I know of families who are still waiting after 5 years, and there's another elderly man whom I know had also waited for over 5 years. I've always cast doubt on this 3-year waiting time. You say that it is an average waiting time, but I ask how many % of the people on the waiting list actually do get the public housing in 3 years. well, that may be a first time, but what about the second and the third time of housing offer? Now, for non-elderly single persons, you have maintained that certain graduates, including university graduates, are also on the queue. But as Mr. Fang had mentioned just now, my colleague, after 1 to 2 years of working upon graduation, they would have exceeded the limit, the $10,000, so they would not be able to join the queue. So that would not create any pressure on your queue. But on the other hand, there are some workers in the 30s or 40s of age. They are single, but they have never been able to get their public housing because of these elderly who come onto the queue, and they are always bumped into the later order of the queue. So I'm asking the question for these people in the 30s and 40s, the single persons. There is no hope for them, it seems. Because once they get to the front of the line, well, someone barges in, someone comes in, and they're bumped off again. So this is a very serious problem. And further, a question on your output in terms of construction completion. Now, you are talking about 5-year plan now, and for the 3 years, for instance, for the next year and the year after, there is no room for improvement. It can only be as bad as this for your projections. And one other question. Some of the institutions are looking for sites. They find it very difficult even to purchase private units. And we have been asking whether for the public housing there can be certain levels or stories dedicated to institutions or homes so as to provide more beds and space for people who need this kind of accommodation and service. That is, for the housing projects that you have, can you perhaps dedicate certain stories or levels for these homes and institutions?
First, on the 3-year waiting list, I can tell you that as we've just completed an exercise. In fact, we briefed members on that at the last meeting. The figures show that currently about 52 to 56% of people get into public rental housing within the 3-year time limit. That's why the actual current average waiting time is about 2.7 years. But that, of course, means there are people who will stay on the waiting list longer. There's no way to ignore that fact. And that's what we're trying constantly to try and increase the number of units that we can produce to get them in quicker. In terms of the time, how long does it take people to get in on the second or third offer? Really, we can't control that. That's their choice. We can make the offer, but if they choose not to accept an offer, there's not very much we can do. In terms of the quota and point system, in fact, the Long-Term Housing Strategy Steering Committee did recommend that we look at two things. As I said before, taking people off that list who will never qualify and should not be on that list. And that's something we will be doing. We'll be consulting the Housing Authority on that. Secondly, looking at can we gradually extend the 3-year waiting time also to people on that waiting list. Gradually, and the suggestion is it should start at 45, then 40, and then 35, and so on, so that we can deal with this problem that the Honourable Member has quite rightly pointed out, that people get on the list and they gradually move up, but then older people come in, get higher points, and can get in ahead of them. So this is something we will be looking at in conjunction with the Housing Authority. In terms of the immediate 2 years in the 5-year plan, frankly, there is no scope for us to change the current production target because we're already committed to contracts. The work has already started. Frankly, we should already be on the superstructure, not even the foundations. So within the 2 to 3 to even the 4th year, it's very difficult to increase it. It's really only in that 5th year that we can perhaps, and we've done this as much as we can, bring forward some of the production, and we'll continue to do that. Finally, on using space within Housing Authority, sites for institutions. In fact, we do work with Social Welfare Department to come up with sites, and indeed there's a paper coming up later where we will be developing a social welfare site which will incorporate space for different welfare agencies. So we do already do that, and we're quite happy to work with Social Welfare Department if they can advise us as to what would be the best mix of facilities.
就希望呢，大家呢就真係要掌握4分鐘呢就連問。
Really, we have to keep close to the 4 minutes for Q&A. For 20 seconds or 30 seconds, how can you expect the administration to give you the answer, the HA to give you a complete answer? So let us do cooperate. Let us do keep to the 4-minute time, and so that we will have sufficient time for the HA's response.
So Lee again. We've been discussing this issue again and again, and frankly speaking, we can't just conjure more out of the thin air, but can we produce more? Well, today there was a blaze and subdivided the flats, and the buildings department couldn't take enforcement action because otherwise those people could not be housed properly, and they could not get PRH flats either. So there is really an imminent need for us to produce more PRH flats so that people can be housed. And apart from the housing target, as you mentioned, is there any other way to expedite the production? For example, what about the vacant quarters, etc.? Is it possible to come up with more ways? Yuen Long Bin interim housing, I've been mentioning this to Mr. Pascott. When can it be recovered for PRH production? Because a lot more flats could be produced. Are there ways to redevelop older estates for more units? Now that's one way, but on the other hand, is the government not taking ahead with the redevelopment projects? I understand that you need to make transient arrangements for reprovisioning, and sometimes after redevelopment, those sites become private residential sites or commercial sites. If the after redevelopment it's used for PRH housing, then we see great potential here.
Yes, it is very difficult. You're absolutely right. But in fact, the government has now been looking at unlocking sites as much as we can, including the sites that you've described, vacant quarter sites. Even we're looking at some vacant housing authority sites that we can bring in a bit quicker. There are a number of challenges. One is rezoning. And quite often if a site's zoned for, say, GIC, and we want to change it, we have to go through the process of consultation. That's quite right. The district, local community wants to know how we're going to use those sites. So that does take time. We're also looking at it from a practical point of view. How can we speed up the process of construction? How can we shorten the time frame that it takes to build? Because I think that's another element that we must look at. In terms of redevelopment, again, we accept what you're saying. We need to look at redevelopment. But again, the constraint there is, do we have enough reprovisioning so that we can decant the people that live in there currently into local decanting accommodation? Because clearly if we can't do that, the resistance to clearing those sites out is greater. And the challenge with that is that we find, even when we've announced the clearance of a site, people tend to stick in the site. They don't get out early, which allows us to clear it early. So we have to give basically 3 years' notice. And then, of course, we're in parallel trying to do all of the necessary work to get that project going forward. So you've mentioned Long Bin. We could mention a number of other sites. When we're ready and when we can consult the public, we will do so, and I can assure you that that's our intention.
But about redevelopment, it doesn't appear here in your paper, right? How many years normally does it take for a redevelopment project to take place? Does it mean the second 5-year period?
Time. Honestly, if I'm starting now, I mean, we're talking Pac Tin is already into the second 5-year period. That's the reality, and we've already announced that. So it does take a long time.
梁志祥。
Mr. Leung Chi-chang. Mr. Leung Chi-chang, not here. So Mr. Albert Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, earlier the Housing Authority received some recommendations, and I again like to express my views. Well, there is shortage of supply, and the construction progress is slow. However, you should not target university students. You should not, because of policy blunders in the past, sacrifice those applicants as scapegoats. That's the fault of the previous administration of Donald Tsang. You cannot pick on those applicants with higher education attainments. They should be taken out of the list. And well-off tenants, they can't pay double rent. Instead, they would be asked to go. So I'd like to express strongly my objection. I think this is totally wrong. Some people are only sacrificing the interest of people so that CY policies can be implemented. Well, in the coming 10 years, it's said that the target should be 480,000. So on average, a year, it's 16 to 17,000. In the coming 4 years, that means it's short. It's 15,000 short. So the problem is really serious. I think the administration should think about it. You cannot catch up with the demand. So, are there any interim measures to relieve the housing demand? You can have something like temporary housing or interim housing, or during the SARS outbreak, you had some form of temporary housing, or you allow people to build squatter huts or some sort of temporary housing. The administration should come up with temporary measures in the coming 3 years to address the housing demand. And on the transfer of households in PRH estates, now extended urban district, the situation is serious. Only 19,000 from 2013 to 2017, and 31,000 for urban district. Overall speaking, is still not sufficient. For those queuing for urban district, they can be allocated with flats faster than those in extended urban district and the new territories. So, will the director consider this? If you have flats completed in the urban district, then for those that have chosen extended urban district like Chunwan, etc., you can perhaps help them transfer to urban districts first, so that the list can be shorter. If you can help, say, 3,000 to 5,000 applicants a year, then the situation can improve, and I think administratively the government can do it. And there are also PRH tenants who have been living in the new territories and they'd like to be transferred to the urban district. Just please be brief.
When we know that there are more urban area flats coming online, we do actually open the list so people can choose to apply for urban area flats, even if they've chosen extended urban, and we've already done that. We announced that last year. In terms of the various measures, let me make two things very, very clear. The idea of giving additional points to students did not come from the government. It was raised in the Public Accounts Committee by a member of the Public Accounts Committee. At the time, I said we're prepared to look at any suggestions, but it's not something that we have currently put on our agenda. But we will look at it. So I think we need to bear in mind this is just one of a number of ideas that have been raised. Secondly, in terms of the target, issues relating to temporary or interim housing, you mentioned SARS. That's fine for a very short period. You can always convert something like holiday homes into these. But as a permanent solution, you have to provide permanent housing. And that's why we really must get additional land to provide additional housing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
梁志祥議員。
Mr. Leung Chi-chang. Thank you, Chairman. On housing production, it's still far lagging behind the production target. Of course, you will be identifying land and recovering land for housing production. Now, talking about the first 5-year period, the housing target is far from sufficient. We have many PRH applicants on the waiting list, and I have received many requests or complaints. The newlyweds, young couples, they can't afford private rental accommodation. And I see that it's very difficult for you as well. Now, Mr. Albert Chan talked about urban district and extended urban districts. Still, the number are far from sufficient. How can they meet the existing demand, let alone the future demands? 230,000 applicants on the waiting list. That's really a worrying situation. It's a time bomb, which may cause more difficulties to the government. So, on PRH production, my question is, does it really take 5 years for you to identify sites and produce flats? Are there many difficulties at the moment, including manpower shortage? I understand that manpower is tight, and does it affect, or is it the main factor affecting your speed of production? And also, you have identified sites across the territory, but have you faced strong opposition from quite a number of district councils? Mr. Prescott.
I'll ask Ada to describe our process, because I think that'll help members to understand. In terms of the two questions of opposition, it is difficult, honestly, at the district level in some districts to get support for our projects, and we now spend a lot more time than we would have done even 2 years ago. But I have to say, I think it's entirely understandable, and it's certainly not something that we're concerned about. We must have this dialogue with the district council and local community so that we can explain what we're trying to do, and more importantly, listen to what members want. So that process is very important, and I think we understand that. In terms of the manpower requirements, manpower is tight, both within the industry generally and within the department. But frankly, that's not the biggest issue in terms of our ability to take forward projects. It's the securing of the sites and getting agreement to allow us to take it forward. Perhaps Ada can take us through the process.
Ms. Fong. Normally, it takes 7 years to complete a PRH production, from planning to feasibility study, technical feasibility studies, assessments, and also other advanced works at the advanced stage, and also planning permits, etc. Then, after the planning stage, it comes to the actual construction, tendering and construction stage. And it takes some time for piling works, as well as 2 years for superstructure and half a year for tendering process. We try to compress the first 3 years to 1 year or shorter than 1 year, so that all these tasks can be completed in parallel in order to compress the time frame. 4.5 years, that's our maximum. For those 7 or 8 years, they will be compressed to just 4.5 years. So in response to members' question, we've tried to compress the time frame as much as we can. Ms. Alice Mack. Well, PS just now stressed time and again that we need to identify more sites for housing production. And recently, there is news from the government that they are going to identify sites for small-scale PRH housing next to some of the estates. Of course, we'd like to optimize land use. We'd like to increase housing production for applicants, be it young applicants or the existing subdivided flat tenants. But how can you secure the consent of local communities, and how can you prevent single and fragmented building blocks? I hope that you will also consider it in your planning. More facilities should also be provided, including additional facilities to the community to gain their acceptance. As you said, PS, so that you can achieve the purpose of finding more sites.
Yes, in fact, let me clarify that the suggestion for infill sites, which I think you're talking about, came from the long-term housing strategy steering committee. I must say that it's not something new. We have been doing this for many years. It's something that we've constantly looked at to see whether we can optimize the value and use of all of our sites. But you're absolutely right. I think we've got to balance the facilities that people enjoy, the facilities that people need, and we heard a comment earlier about more facilities for institutions and organizations against the need for additional housing for this category. So that's part of our objective. When we look at sites, we'd always look at this mix. And honestly now, as I said before, we have to consult the district council. We have to listen to the local community. We can't just push these things ahead. So that process is much more complicated. But I take the point.
主席，我想講就頭先特別處長講呢樣嘢唔係新嘅，即係你不嬲都。
Yes, this is not new, as you have pointed out, but why do I raise this again? It is because in many of the housing estates, every time the plans are raised, they are not very ideal. And therefore, there are a lot of dissents in the local community, and as a result of that, the projects have been delayed for years in certain instances. But because we have a dire need for housing, I do not want to see that the projects be delayed unduly. So my suggestion is that you learn from past lessons so that the proposals that you raise will be agreeable to the local community. And we are not really just talking about the facilities of the newly built flats, but rather for the existing estates as well. They have been asking for facilities as well.
Because, in fact, the process, it doesn't involve giving people a final finished product. We go to them quite early on so they can influence the outcome. It's a deliberate approach, but perhaps Ada can explain it better than I can.
Well, actually, even when we were identifying the sites, we would consult the local community. We talk to the residents in the area, and we talk to them concerning any facilities needs they have. And then we will develop the public housing together with the development of these facilities. But of course, there are limitations. For instance, there are certain communities which do not want to have public housing in their area at all. And where it is possible for facilities, for pedestrians crossings, etc., we will take those, or parks, we take those into consideration as well, with the intention of injecting new energy into the area, and also not to adversely affect the flow or air quality and the view of the area. So when I talked about the 4.5 years, I included all these, the feasibility study, the technical valuation, the public consultation, etc. And we really do need a lot of efforts in order to overcome a lot of the difficulties, demands from society, from the local community, as well as technical difficulties. We want to reach a win-win situation where the local community will have more facilities, improved facilities, and also the area would be able to accommodate these public housing units. Mr. Chairman, I have come across a case, 3 people family who have been waiting since 2008. The 3-year average waiting time is not true, because if you take away those who cannot go on to, will have no hope, etc., it's more than that. And you have lower target now. You have to tell us, HA will have to tell us, how can you really make good that target of 3 years waiting time? If you can have 80% of the applicants getting their accommodation within 3 years, that is acceptable. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to make that claim. How do you come up with a plan to substantiate that claim? Now, a second issue. In fact, it is all the problem is all with the problem of thinking, the mindset of the officers. How can it be 5 years? I mean, I really cannot understand, because these are so simple. You can just cookie cut, can't you? Even the Tama, the headquarters, the government headquarters at Tama didn't take that long. Now, for the plans, for private developers, in that time, they will be able to build 2, 3 such buildings. The community halls, the outdoor bus stops, etc. If the Lama Peninsula is to wait for that kind of pace of construction, well, what is the future? I mean, the community hall, I mean, within a shorter period of time, the developers will be able to build a bigger community hall than what you're planning now with private housing on top. You're talking about allocation of sites or identification of sites. For the bus depots, for instance, even though there are height restrictions, actually 2 buildings would definitely be more advantageous than 1. And for Lama Peninsula, I know from the 7th story up, these are residential only from the 7th story up. Now, for the urban areas, the Chaiwan industrial area had been identified, and there's another one where 200 is identified. I mean, how do you respond to these questions?
The figures that we produce on the average waiting time have recently been the subject of a Public Accounts Committee investigation. The Director of Audit didn't challenge the figures. In fact, he confirmed that those figures speak for themselves. The 3-year waiting time that we talk about, the average waiting time, that's what we achieve. And in fact, it's 2.7 years. The fact is, of course, it is an average. So there are people who don't meet that 3-year waiting time. That's a fact, and I accept that. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I have to say, the way it's calculated is rational, given the system. In terms of our production timetable, I have to say that we build as fast as anybody. It doesn't matter whether you're talking private sector or anyone else. The housing authority's construction time is the same as everybody else's. What is different is that we get sites that have not already been formed, zoned, and planned. We have to do that work ourselves quite often, and that's what takes the time. But if you give us the same site as you would give a private sector, we'd probably build it quicker, because we do use standard approach. We do use a large proportion of the construction as being prefabrication built off site, so it's just slotted in. We're very efficient. Perhaps Ada can deal with the other points in terms of the comparison with the private sector.
The timetable is on the basis of 40-story buildings comparison. So 6 days we'll be able to complete 1 story, standard story. And of course, the rooftop and the ground floor would be different. We follow a reasonable and what is admissible within the planning in terms of the limitation of heights, etc. What we try to do is to use lights which have not been identified as impossible to develop. We are also building buildings on housing on those sites as well. our production target really cannot meet the demand if we follow the existing pace of development. And the paper says that in the next 5 years, we are to downward adjust the target or production by 2,000 units. And I'm surprised that Mr. Leung, C.Y. Leung, the CE, which claims that housing is the most important among the most important of his objectives. And we thought at least there will be 82,000 units, but it is now downward adjusted even from that humble target. Yes, even though we're talking about 2,000 units, but 2,000 units is no small fry. Why can there be such development plans which says here that the district councils are not in agreement and therefore the project has been stalled? How can that be? And at the same time, we're looking at tragedies and accidents in the divided or subdivided flats, which we have seen only recently again. Now, we are still following this kind of development pace. Since the return of sovereignty from 2008 to 2002, the production was 50,000 per year. I'm sure you remember, Mr. Chairman. And from 88 to 97, it was 40,000. But we are looking at 15,000 now. And this really cannot meet the demand. And the queue is getting longer and the situation is getting more dire. And also we're looking at flats, private flats with a lot of problems in hygiene, fire hazards, etc. I would like to know what solutions are there from the Housing Department, NHA. Professor Lau had made the following suggestion. What is your response from the administration? And that is, for estates which are over 40 years of age, they will be redeveloped. And since from the time of announcement of redevelopment to the actual construction, there will be a period of time. Pak Tin is a case in point. The residents have evacuated 500 units in total, but there will be another 1 to 2 years before it will be demolished. So during this interim, can this be a halfway house to meet housing needs? And the second phase of reconstruction is 5 years from now, that is 2018. But even now, as far as I know, since February of this year, there have been over 100 units vacated, and they will continue to be vacated for the coming years until 2018, when the redevelopment starts. I would like to know how you can maximize the usage of these units.
Rental housing figures are concerned. I think Annex 1 is the one that we should be talking about. The figures over the next 5 years, 81,600. That's the actual delivery that we're talking about. We haven't reduced the numbers at all on public rental housing. What we have done is we've had to adjust the delivery on the home ownership scheme, and that will be put back into the second part of the following year, whereas originally there would have been around 4,000. It's now 2,200 plus then 4,200 in the next year. So the figures are there, and they're in Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the paper. In terms of Professor Lau's idea, in fact, I have spoken to him. There are a number of issues here. One is, once we've cleared part of the site for the purposes of eventually demolishing the site, the last thing I want to do is put people in that we then have to relocate again, because it does not make sense. We already have a problem finding sufficient decanting accommodation for those people who are already there. If we're going to add to that decanting problem, and it would be a problem because there's no guarantee someone would move out, then that makes the completion of the redevelopment process even more difficult. So I'm not convinced that that's a solution to our problem, even in the short term. And indeed, as you said yourself, we're talking maybe a few hundred units. It seems to me that it's far better for us to focus on getting the redevelopment as quickly and as efficiently as we can so that there are no delays, because on redevelopment we get a few thousand units back. That's what we should be going for, the bigger picture. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
郭家麒議員。
主席，有時同政
Kwok-hing, sometimes it's very difficult negotiating with the administration because they are telling a lie. I'm looking at the papers, 2013 to 2016, 3 years, 46,000 units had to be built, 46,000 units. That will benefit 220,000 people within 3 years. I hope that is indeed feasible. The HA had put down 3 years, however false it is as a waiting time. I would like to ask a question. When will there be a time where the education attainment of a person will become a reason for taking points away from him in his waiting qualification? But of course, we have to take into account family situation, number of people in the families, etc. But for education background to be a reason.
And another question, you may not be able to answer it. I see that, for example, in 2016, 17, or 15, 16, the Anderson Road site will be completed, and you have DE, AB, and C. These sites are similar. Why can't the administration, for example, push forward the Anderson Road project to be completed in 2016-17 to 15-16? And after 2017-18, for the coming 10 years, the administration is confident in identifying more sites. And I'm just asking for advancing it by 1 year. If you can do that each year, you can come up with an additional 20,000. And finally, about HOS flats, 2016-17 and 2017-18, I see that few flats can be completed, and they're all located in remote areas. In urban areas, the number is very small, and very few in extended urban district as well. Has the administration tried hard enough to identify land in the urban extended areas? For example, I can see in 2017-18, those HOS production in remote areas.
Thank you. We don't lie. The second point is the education attainment idea came from a member of the Public Accounts Committee. I've explained that's something that we have no plans to do, but we will look at it since it was a recommendation that came out of the Public Accounts Committee. It's not for us to introduce that sort of thing. I think it's for the Housing Authority to consider all the factors as to consider which ways to go forward. In terms of the Anderson Road, I'll leave that to Ada. In terms of trying to speed up the process and find sites in the urban area, as we said earlier, we take sites as they come available. We're always pushing to find sites both in the urban area and extended and new territories. But you don't get the sites on an even basis in all districts at all times. They come at different times because they're subject to different constraints. So we take them, we put them into the program as and when they're available, and we take them forward. So we'll continue to look for sites all over the place, not just in the urban area. Ada, why don't you talk about Anderson Road?
Anderson Road. Well, we've just repossessed the site for construction. Site formation works have to be completed before we commence the superstructure project. So if we can start that as soon as possible, there won't be any delay. So we've tried to speed things up as soon as possible. Mr. Frederick Fong. Several questions, Chairman. HOS, Para 7. And also Annex 1 about HOS flats. 2016-17, 2,200, that's the first batch, and also 17,000 HOS flats from 16-17 and 19-20. But we see that for HOS production in the table, the total number is 6,300. That's about 3,100 per year. And what about the remaining 10,000? It's not shown here. Does it mean that you haven't identified any sites? If so, in 2019-20, how are you going to meet the targets? How can you give us confidence that you can meet the target? Second question. I've all along been making this point. I don't know whether we have seen an improvement. In the past, I mentioned that 65% of the PRH production in coming 5 years will be in the urban district, which means that in the past several years, nothing has been done in relation to finding land in extended urban district and the new territories for housing productions. So, do you have any plans that in the extended urban district and the new territories you are going to gradually identify more sites for PRH production? Another simple question. Annex 1 2017-18, 2 sites in Sam Shui Po. One is the wholesale food market site. That's the existing land use. Are you going to successfully rezone the site? And also, let's turn to Annex 2. 1P, 2P, some over 10,000, and then also 1-bedroom flat, 2-bedroom flat, respectively 12,000, 16,000, 26,000, 10,000, etc. For 2-bedroom flat, the percentage is rather low. I don't want you to manipulate the figures. Now, if you can build more smaller flats, you can then boost the figure. But in terms of the land available, we haven't seen an increase. And in redeveloped districts, there are many larger households. If I recall correctly, a 4P household can get a 1-bedroom flat. So would that be sufficient?
I'll ask Ada to help me on a couple of these. In terms of the total production, I did say in my opening remarks that we have secured the land for the full 17,000, but of course we're just showing you the production in the first 5-year period, so the others will fall into the second 5-year period in terms of the HOS. In terms of securing additional land, yes, we are in fact working with Development Bureau, Planning Department and Lands Department to find sites, not in any particular area. We're trying to find them anywhere, including the extended urban and new territories. Those sites that are offered to us, we will take forward as quickly as we possibly can. Finally, in terms of the distribution of units from 1P, 2P up to 2-bedroom, we do have a system of annual review of the demand, the forthcoming demand in the 5-year period. We put this through the process so that the production figures correspond to what we anticipate to be the demand based on the waiting list. So it isn't fixed every year, but what we're doing is planning for the 5th year. So this time this year, we'll be doing the next 5th year. So we do keep that under constant review, and this is the way it's looking at the moment.
Ms. Wong, a succinct response? Yes, we are identifying sites across the territory for PRH reduction. The distribution may not be even in a year, but indeed, throughout the territory, we try to get hold of any available land for PRH production. On HOS, in 2016-17 and 17-18, I can provide some information on the 5-year production target. For 18-19 or 19-20, we're going to provide 17,000 flats. Mr. Raymond Wong, not here. Mr. Kwok-hing. Thank you, Chairman. Over 200,000 applicants on the waiting list. It's a huge number. The government is trying its best to deal with the situation. The demand will always exceed supply. We need to take a pragmatic approach. The public housing construction program is the first step. It should be proceeded with accordingly. We don't want to see any delay. and the administration already said that they will spare no effort to expedite the progress. I think the direction is correct. However, in order for us to have faith in you that you have indeed spared no effort, if possible, please explain to us in the future, for example, how you've managed to save time and all the details. Now, in your PowerPoint presentation, very clearly, I can see from now to 2022, you have identified sufficient site for 17,000 HOS flats. I think it's a good thing, but apart from, for 170,000 PRH flats. Now, 9 years ago, we are now in 2013, so you're going to identify sites for the coming 9 years, and you have done that. Will you do more so that we get the feeling that you have indeed spared no effort? And about infield sites, I think you need to take a targeted approach, because the size of the site will be very small, and I hope that you can produce small flats for singletons, in particular non-elderly singletons. If they are employed, if due to their needs they would like to save time and stay in the urban district for convenience. And the FTU also proposed that there should be a B-type public rental housing. Say, for example, for those young people, a higher rate of rent can be charged, and these young people can save up by living in those B-type housing so that they can have enough money for private housing in the future. And another point is, in the past, the civil service establishment was reduced, but we see such a huge public rental housing production target. I think the establishment should be increased.
In fact, I can say that we have been looking to increase our establishment over the last 2 years. We have, with members' support, been able to create posts, and we will continue to do that. It's something I have to keep an eye on, and we will, in fact, be coming both this time and next time with papers on establishment increases. In terms of the infill sites, as I said before, I think this is something we will have to look at, but obviously we need to bear in mind local concerns as we take this forward. In terms of flats for singletons, government has come up with this hostel approach for younger people, where they have a fixed duration, maybe 5 years. They can save up some money, as the honourable member has suggested. I think that's something that we'll see how that goes. But of course, from the perspective of the Housing Authority, our mandate is to provide housing for those people who really need public housing. So that's where my focus is at the moment. But I think government's aware of the other ideas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, Mr. Wong Kwok-hing. Mr. Wong Kwok-hing, wake him up. Please wake him up. Mr. Wong Kwok-hing, your turn. Mr. Wong Kwok-hing, no questions from you? No? Mr. James Toh. Chairman, well, I don't know whether this question has been answered before I came in. I want to confirm it. Is it the case that if applicants are non-elderly singletons with university education attainment, will points be deducted? I'm sorry, he has answered the question twice. He clarified that, in fact, a member mentioned it at the PAC meeting, and so far the administration will have promised to consider it. So my question is he going to consider it? Okay, I am very surprised. I asked Mr. Pascott to answer your question directly. So, indeed, will you consider it? If so, I am shocked, even if you are willing to consider it, Mr. Pascott.
And these are ideas that have been floated by the Public Accounts Committee. I'm obliged to look at them. I have no choice in the matter. Once the idea has been floated, I have to follow up. Whether or not it's something I would recommend to the Housing Authority, who has to make the final decision, that's a different matter. But I've assured Public Accounts Committee they've made the suggestion, we will investigate.
Okay. 我想問一問，即係柏志高先生作為
So, Mr. Pascott, as the permanent secretary, I think he can also exchange his views with members of this panel. I don't quite get it. If this is implemented, I mean, first of all, is it really feasible? For example, let's say I have housing need and then apply for PRH because, for example, I can't build a squatter hut or rooftop structure or or afford private accommodation. So I think the most objective criterion would be my income. Age, well, that's better, but education attainment, because of a higher qualification, he would be pushed back in the waiting list. Well, frankly, education is not pegged to income. Can this really be an objective criterion?
Is Mr. Prescott saying very simply that whatever the Public Accounts Committee recommends, they will look at it? Or do you have some preliminary thoughts that you can share with us?
This is something that we have to look at. It has been suggested.
You have to look at it, yes.
Yeah.
But can you have some preliminary analysis on the feasibility?
Mr. Chairman, we already have a system of deducting points from, for example, people who live in public housing already. I don't know if we could adopt the same thing where we deduct points. I don't know. I haven't looked at it.
No, I want to prompt you that whether you see...
Oh, I'm not going to comment until I've looked at it. That would be very dangerous.
You haven't looked at it?
No.
But you said you will look at it?
Yeah.
You will, but you haven't.
陶議員，大家唔好咁樣對話好唔好啊？即係亦都好難記錄。
唔係啊，主席啊，個問題。
一係你講，一係就佢講。
主席，我同
Either you speak or he speaks. Please don't speak at the same time. Well, I think Mr. Prescott cannot say this. It is nonsense. I'm not asking him to make a decision, but as a civil servant, as a senior civil servant in AO, at least you will have a feeling, a commentary as to whether something is feasible or not. You say that this is a suggestion from the Public Accounts Committee, but on the other hand, you say you have no opinions on this yet, but in fact it's been brewing within society for some time. Can't you tell us whether it is feasible, and if it's feasible or not feasible, for what reasons? I will give you time, Mr. Prescott. Mr. To had made his views known. I will allow you to make your views known.
I think it would be totally wrong of me to give a personal opinion on something which has been recommended by members of this Legislative Council Public Accounts Committee. I've explained that the normal process is we take away a suggestion, we study it, we make a recommendation to the Housing Authority. We will follow that process. My view is irrelevant in this context, really, because whether I think it's sensible or non-sensible doesn't matter. Until I've studied it, it would be wrong to comment. Thank you.
主席，我講係政府分析啊，我唔係你個人分析啊。
Not your personal view, but what about the government? Do they not have a preliminary analysis?
Personal opinion, I'm afraid.
OK， 政府即係冇分析啦，即係暫時。
我哋答完啦呢。
Well, in that case, he's saying that the government does not have an analysis. Yes, I was in the demonstration outside of the HA yesterday. You are the permanent secretary, and of course, in the process of policy making, it is a very important position. And when Mr. To asks you your view as to whether a person's educational attainment will become a consideration or a limitation on his qualification for getting a housing accommodation? You can answer that question. You can. I think you should answer that question. I can tell you, I think it is quite atrocious because we are encouraging people to get an education because Hong Kong needs is to develop into a knowledge economy and all that. And how can you make it a detriment? How can you make it a limitation for these people who have studied for getting their housing? If you have this kind of policy, it will be JR'd, and if so, you'll definitely lose the case. I cannot imagine any other place on earth where people would make it a criterion for deducting points or making it not as easy for someone to get accommodation just because he has attained certain education levels. I think you should answer that question posed by Mr. To. This is not your personal view. But even if you provide your personal view, it is fine because you are a person, aren't you? You are an individual. As an individual, do you think that this proposal is reasonable? To my mind, if we set a precedent, definitely there will be judicial review. In the LegCo meeting, for instance, well, if you do not provide a suitable answer, you are ducking the issue. Yes, and we also have to understand that the LegCo, if we tell him that this is inappropriate behavior on his part, well, when the policy has come to pass, if it should come to pass, and it is JR'd, we will definitely lose, and he will lose, and we also stand to lose.
I respect the view, and of course, the fact that members feel it's inappropriate will be taken into account when we take this matter forward. I really don't think I can comment on something which I just don't understand the implications. For example, I'm sure there will be some legislation that might be relevant to this. Human rights legislation may be relevant. There may be other pieces of legislation. But because I haven't studied it, I don't know. It may well be that it couldn't be taken forward on that ground.
I think it totally depends on the common sense.
Well,
whether there should be a discrimination on someone who has studied in the university and then they will automatically disqualify or have some kind of discredit for the housing, public housing project. I think it's common sense.
Well,
if a government cannot deal with the common sense and
please allow him the time to answer the question. Yes, please answer the question.
Suggestion from members, it's certainly not my recollection, was that we should ban people. In fact, at the Public Accounts Committee there was a suggestion that we should apply an age limit, and I said no. If people have a need for housing, they should be able to apply and be considered, and that's my basic position. And that should apply to everybody.
But whether it's a kind of discrimination or not, you are the
I have to study that.
Who need to have some kind of
Time is up, Mr. Leung. Time is up, Mr. Leung. Yeah, I have my 4 minutes as member of the LegCo. I have a few questions. First of all, in the paper, it says that for the first 5 years and the next 5 years together, 10 years, the production would be 182,000 units. And for HOS, you do not have a figure for the 10 years, but let's say 5,000 per year, 10 years would be 50,000. So that would be the total production. It will amount to 232,000 in total, but for the long-term strategy, it is 470,000, 6-4 proportion. And 60% of 470,000 would include PRH and HOS, and that will be 282,000 in total. So for the 2 5-year plan together, we have a shortfall of at least 50,000 units. Now, if we already see that for these 2 5-year plans, 10 years in total, compared to the long-term strategy, 60%, there is a shortfall of 50,000 units. That is a big shortfall. How do you address that shortfall? That's the first question. Second question, in 2017 to 18, for PRH in the new territories, it is a zero supply. What is the problem? What is the reason? Because it will create a major shortfall in terms of allocation. How can there be zero supply for 2017 to 2018 in the new territories?
There is a shortfall in terms of what we have already secured for public housing and HOS production and what might be required as a result of the long-term housing strategy. I can say that government is already working to try to identify the additional sites, and the community is aware of these. We're talking about new development areas. We're talking about having to build a new town, at least within the time frame that we're talking about, and that will have to come from new development areas, some reclamation, some redevelopment of existing sites, which we're also looking at. All of these sources of land are being considered at the moment. So that's something that we're working on. And in due course, I fully expect the Development Bureau will be able to explain what they're going to do on that. As far as I'm concerned, if the Housing Authority and the Housing Department has to produce 280,000 PRH and HOS, then of course I need to make sure I have the resources for that as well, not just the land, but the staffing, the money, etc. So this is something that we have to work very hard to secure. In terms of the shortfall in the new territories, perhaps Ada can explain that one.
For each of the areas, in terms of sites, land supply and planning, they're all different. And therefore, the pace of development for each of the projects is also different. For the urban area, extended urban area, and new territories, they are different again year on year. But for any sites we can obtain right away and develop, we will do so right away. And they differ from area to area and from year to year. And for 2017 to 18, it is indeed true that for the new territories there are none available. But in the same year, for the year before, 2016 and 2017, 4,000 units are to be completed in Tuen Mun area, and that is a big number as well. So in the 5 years overall, in the different areas, there will be PRH developments and production. But overall speaking, in the 5 years for new territories, it is lower in terms of figures. It is only about 16% of the total. So for urban, extended urban, there will be bigger production. My response is that in the next 5 years, if you do not try your best to find sufficient land supply in the next 5-year plan, you will be failing even before you start. And that is a very serious warning. And I will stop here. I have completed my 4 minutes. Because we have exceeded the time for this agenda item, we will have to go to the next agenda item now. Because of time, we will have to do so. We have 2 other agenda items to cover. And if at 4:30 we are not able to complete the discussion, please allow me, electoral members, to extend for at least 15 minutes to see whether we can catch up. The second agenda is Public Works Program, item number B, 195 SC Community Hall at Sam Ming Road, Kwun Tong, and the papers are CB 1411131405. And CB1 411131406, and also relevant papers CB1 1153121303 concerning the Public Works Program on the Community Hall at Sao Ming Road, Kwun Tong. And I will not introduce the members of the administration one by one in the interest of time. And in fact, in June of this year, we have already discussed this on the 3rd of June of this year. And this had been raised to Category A. And at the meeting, members had discussed at length this issue and asking for further information concerning the community hall accommodation of non-government institutions and bodies and how to maximize on the plot ratio of this particular project. That was the additional information asked for. And there will be a resubmission of the Public Works program to the panel for discussion. Now, since this had already been discussed in a previous meeting, we will only focus on the issues that were raised in the last meeting, and that is the non-government bodies or institutions accommodation and the maximization of the plot ratio for the community hall at Sao Ming Road. So would the administration please focus on those issues?
Mr. Prescott?
A very quick presentation. As you mentioned, this was raised first at the 3rd of June Housing Panel meeting, where we sought members' support to upgrade the Public Works programme on the Community Hall at Sao Ming Road to Category A. The intention is to demolish the existing Sao Mau Ping Central Estate Community Centre and construct a new standard community hall at Sao Ming Road, Kwun Tong, as part of a joint development with the public housing development. It'll be a standalone structure abutting the public housing block. Project's estimated to cost $134.9 million in money of the day prices, and demolition works scheduled for commencement in July 2014 for completion in May of 2018 to tie in with the scheduled completion of the adjoining public housing development. In June, we briefed members on the project details, and today we'd like to provide supplementary information on the proposed project and respond to the various inquiries raised by members at the meeting in June. In particular, members were concerned whether the services of the NGO at the existing community centre would be interrupted. I can inform members that after working together with the concerned departments, that is Social Welfare and Home Affairs Department, we've reached agreement with the NGOs, and they are satisfied with both the long-term and interim accommodation arrangements that we have for them in the same district. Their services will not be interrupted. We plan to submit the proposed project to Public Works Subcommittee in January and Finance Committee in February. Ada, if I can invite you to take us through the supplementary information.
Yes, Ms. Fong. Just briefly walking members through this supplementary information in relation to the reprovisioning arrangement for the existing NGOs at the community centre, and whether the plot ratio of the project site has been maximised and whether floor area can be increased. Here are the supplementary information. For the 5 NGOs operating in Sao Mau Ping Community Centre, we have discussed with them and we have reached an agreement that they would like to continue to provide service to the community, and they were willing to move to other premises in the vicinity, and they are willing to be reprovisioned to either Sao Mau Ping Estate or the public housing developments at Anderson Road to continue to provide services. And as the Anderson Road development can only be ready for intake at a later stage, we have provided some temporary venues for NGOs to continue with their operation in Sao Mau Ping Estate. Now, about the reprovisioning arrangements for the 5 NGOs, they're set out in the paper. I shall not repeat them. And in the middle of 2014, the NGOs will be moving out. And soon after that, clearance will begin, and we consulted the Housing Committee of Kwun Tong District Council on the 19th of September this year, and members have noted our reprovisioning arrangement, and they urge the administration to construct the community hall as soon as possible. On optimizing site development potential, it's a composite development comprising a new community hall as well as library, study room, and also under planning a footbridge linking the premises to Salming Road so as to maximize the potential of the site. As for the planned footbridge, it's under a separate public works item, the construction of which will be commenced later. As for the new community hall and in the composite development, the permissible domestic plot ratio and non-domestic plot ratio are respectively 4.5 and 1.5. Building height limit 150 mpd. Apart from that, we also have other factors in planning, including visual impact and air ventilation, because this site is originally not zoned for residential use and no high-rise buildings are allowed. And this is a very small site next to a steep slope and is bounded by a terminus, Salming Road, and the slope. The existing slope is steep and high, so stability is of our concern. So the piles of the new community hall will be sleeved and founded at a level so that it will not exert any loading on the slope, so as not to affect the stability of the slope. As for the bus terminus, part of it rests on the crest of the slope and is founded on piles, and we have to be cautious and to avoid altering the part of the bus terminus. Under the existing constraints, we have already maximized the domestic development potential by providing about 320 PRH flats, and domestic building block will be built up to the building height limit under the site restraints. Due to the limited space of the site, the new community hall will abut the domestic block, and there is no further room for horizontal expansion. And according to the building regulations, the prescribed window plane of the domestic flats has to be projected over the roof of the community hall. Thus, the hall is restricted to 2-story. And the roof of the community hall will also serve as an open space according to the planning brief for domestic tenants of the estate. So the design of the community hall has in practice fully utilized the site and maximized the potential. As for project estimate, as set out in the previous paper, the estimated capital cost is $134.9 million in money of the day prices. With members' support, we plan to submit the proposed work to Public Works Subcommittee and the Finance Committee of LegCo in January and February next year. Subject to the funding approval, demolition works will commence in July 2014 for completion in May 2018 to tie in with the completion of the adjoining PRH development. Members, may I remind you that on this item, if there are any direct or indirect pecuniary interest, then please declare the nature of your interest in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. And on Rule 84, would members please observe the relevant rule in relation to direct pecuniary interests and voting matters. Please observe the time limit. We still have another item to be discussed. 3 minutes. Questions and answers included. Mr. Wong Kwok-hing, followed by Dr. Fernando Cheung. Frankly, there isn't much to say for the NGOs, so I don't plan to talk about it. But a question for Mr. Pascott. In the last item, you said that tertiary students are not being discriminated against. Mr. Leung, please don't go back to the previous item. No, just one question. There are 4 major estates, Wong Kwok-hing, North Point, and this one, and the Shancock Road estate. Well, these sites have turned into sites for private residential development. So how can you tell tertiary students, well, sorry, Mr. Leung, if you digress, I will have to stop you. No, I can link it to this topic. For Shelving Road, you said that you have made all efforts to ensure that the community will not be affected, and the NGOs have also agreed to the arrangement. So about the 4 big estates, public estates turning into sites for private residential developments. 4 public housing estates, how can it be related to this community hall? Of course it is related, because he said that he has spared no effort. But has he tried his best to prevent those 4 sites from turning into private developments? Hon Tin, Wong Kwok-hing, North Point, please don't digress. Ask a question on this item. Wong Kwok-hing, North Point, Hon Tin, and Shancock Road, 4 estates, some 20,000 PRH flats done away with. Have you discussed with the NGOs how they can help the residents? What's the relevance with this topic? The administration is urging for members' support for the construction. Well, let's see if he can explain this. If he can't, I won't support him. I'm sorry, I'm chairman. Please allow me to follow the agenda. If he can give me a good explanation, I'll support the Shelving Road project. I just want him to explain why the 4 estates would have become ruins. Well, if you say it's not related, if he cannot explain it, well, then I
respond to my answer. I will not support. I will not support your proposal. That's very clear. I think it's nonsense.
I
think I won't allow you this question. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. We discussed this item previously, and my major concern is the reprovisioning arrangements for these NGOs. I understand that there is some improvement, and yet for the Kwun Tong Youth Service Corps, they come directly under the HAB, which means that they are not, they don't have the charitable status under Section 88 of the IRO. Now they will be reprovisioned to the Samao Ping South Estate, and they have been asked to obtain the charitable status before they can apply for it. Well, they are not worried. They are going to apply for it. But this organization have been established for 40 years. They need to dig out some old documents, and they are due to move in June next year. If they can't obtain the status, they can't apply for use of the site. Now they are only charged a nominal rent of $1, and in the future they need to pay $2,000 for rent. And all of the members are volunteers. They need to raise funds themselves. So can special consideration be given so that they can be guaranteed that they can be reprovisioned, while at the same time they can apply for the charity status under Section 88. Who would like to take this question, Mr. Pascal?
Work with the organisation. In fact, we'll work with Home Affairs to try and resolve this one, because, as you say, they've got a long history and they provide good services. So we'll work with Home Affairs to try and come up with a resolution that's acceptable.
即係冇問題啊嘛，因為即係佢哋就話。
That means no problem, right? Because they say that they haven't obtained the status, and the staff told them that they cannot proceed unless they get the status. So can you give special consideration and guarantee that they will be reprovisioned?
Have expected them to have any problem getting the status as a charitable organisation. As the honourable member knows, it's a very straightforward process. So I don't anticipate any particular problems with that.
And I'm not asking about whether they will face any obstacle in their application. Mrs. Hui Kwok-san from the Home Affairs Department is here, as well as Ms. Yu. Would you like to take this question? Yes, thank you, Chairman. We discussed with our officers in the district, and they will try their best to help them. And they are also aware of the background of the Kwun Tong Youth Service Corps. And in applying for the status under Section 88 of the ILO, they will try their best to give them support. Perhaps after the meeting, we can arrange for a meeting with the NGO. Dr. Zheng's question is, what if they cannot get the status under Section 88 at the time when they are to be reprovisioned? Will they be allowed to be reprovisioned first before they proceed? Finish with the Mr. Pascal, can you give this undertaking?
I can assure you they won't be made to go out on the streets or anything. We'll make sure that they get in, even if they haven't got the final agreement. As long as it's in process, it's not a problem.
Okay.
So that's an undertaking, right? We put on record. This problem will be solved. Well, actually, I have a second question. May I be given 2 more minutes?
Please be brief. Now, this particular facility is actually 6 stories high. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure you know that well. And there is space inside with NGOs accommodated with very low rentals. This is probably historical in the sense that the community hall had always had that facilities for the NGO, but now with the new community hall, it is only 2 stories high, not 6 stories. And the hall itself, the auditorium, will be extended. It will be made bigger. And the NGO's area would be smaller. And therefore, they have to move out. And after they have moved out, they will not move back in. I'm not saying that this should be postponed for any reason. No, I'm not saying that, Mr. Chairman. But rather, with this space, can it not be maximized? Because there is space still on top. If we can build space to accommodate NGOs, the existing ones, or other new NGOs, wouldn't we be maximizing the usage of the rooftop area or what is the space above the auditorium? In fact, I do not understand why it is reduced to 2 stories from the original 6. I hope that when we build these facilities, we are maximizing the space for NGOs, because we are looking at long queues for NGOs, institutions, etc. Let me talk about the community hall and the designs. These NGOs, in fact, we have found reallocation for them in the Sao Mo Ping area so that they can continue to serve the residents in the Sao Mo Ping area. And this is indeed true that the rooftop area will be used for a rest and recreation area. But for the windows, because of the level of the windows, they cannot be blocked. So there cannot be other buildings aside next to the community hall blocking the windows. But we have tried our best to retain the NGOs in the Sao Mo Ping area. Who will be operating this community hall? Well, exactly. He's asking also about operation as well, isn't it? You want to maximize the space in the community hall. Well, actually, for the community hall design, he's asking about how one maximizes the space. Well, we'll have to talk about the community hall and its design still, Mr. Chairman, because the design is relevant. And it has been agreed that it will be a 450 people accommodation with multifunction rooms. And these multifunction rooms cannot be used as offices of NGOs. And where there is need, these NGOs can rent the rooms for training, for meetings, etc. They can be used by the NGOs. Where the floor area is not increased for the community hall, but to add more services in them, that will be difficult. But the district office is aware of needs in the area for other social service and needs, etc. The social welfare department can also speak up on those needs. Yes, would you please follow up on Professor Cheung's suggestion as much as possible? Yes. Mr. Chairman, when we were talking about the development of the community hall, I also asked questions on the maximization of the floor area. And there seems to be a number of reasons, such as the adjacent development, the public housing estate development, for instance, which is next to it, presenting height restrictions to the community hall, resulting in it being only 2 stories. I have noted those points. But we're going back to the issue of maximizing the use of the community hall and the space. The rooftop of the community hall will be used for recreation and open space purpose. And I would believe the Housing Authority would be operating this open space. I also note from page 8 there the cross-section diagram. Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, because of time, probably, it is a matter of which will be built first. The community hall seems to me will be built first, and after that the public housing estate. What I want to be taken into account is access. Looking at the diagram, I cannot see the actual access, but I'm sure it will be taken care of, but I just want this to be well considered, and the HA will be operating the open space as well. And also this will pertain to cooperation and communication in the future. Yes, we will definitely provide smooth and easy access to the community hall and also over the footbridge to the 2 platforms, and so that the residents can use the open space on top of the community hall. According to the design, we have provided that open space on top of the community hall. We will do so. Well, basically, Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking about the linkage between the estate and the open space and the community hall, because they are designed at differently or separately, and they are to come on stream at different times. Well, we have not provided the detailed design to the LegCo, but rest assured that the facilities and where they can link up with each other and coordinate with each other, we will definitely take those into account. Who is to operate the open space? For the garden, yes, the HA. As for the community hall, the community hall by the Home Affairs Bureau, by Home Affairs. There being no other questions, no, Mr. Albert Chan. For the community hall, I have asked similar questions in previous cases of community halls. I'd like to know whether there can be smaller activity rooms in the community hall. I think they have already answered a similar question. Well, I'd like to know whether there can be more of these activities hall. As for the big hall, the auditorium, whether they can be partitioned into small activities halls. Because very often in the local areas, it is because of a lack of these small rooms that a lot of demands are not answered. The demands from over 100 NGOs sometimes. Well, for our design, for the community hall, for any community hall, there would be a movable partition so that at any one time 2 organizations can simultaneously use the space. Well, it is over 2 users. It is actually very difficult realistically because of acoustics reasons, etc. But in the multifunction rooms, we do have such a design as well. In the past, such meeting rooms can only be used by 1 user. For the new community halls, such as a Billy Street one, there can be 2 partitions. So 1 meeting room can be partitioned into 3 separate areas to accommodate different users. So there are such partitions to allow at least 2 users to use the rooms. And in this particular community hall in question, there will be 2 multi-purpose rooms as well, or halls as well, so as to allow 100% more users. Well, in fact, I have suggested that there should be at least 3 to 4 for such activities halls. You know, one for sometimes there are bookings for Cantonese opera, one for other activities, and there is a lot of such needs from the local community for such activities. I can tell you there are certain venues which are open to rentals, and it would attract over 100 institutions for applications. And when whoever gets the venue at the end of the day, it would seem like winning the Mark 6. So I would like this to be minuted, and that is in the future where there are new community halls designed, that there should be at least 4 such multi-function halls or rooms. Are there any other questions? If not, the committee will have to show support for it to be forwarded to the Public Works Committee. Are we all in agreement in support? Yes, all opinions will be minuted. Yes, Mr. Albert Chang. But are we in support? Yes, we are, unanimously. So this will be forwarded to the Public Works Committee for consideration. And next, we are discussing the proposed creation of 1 supernumerary post of AO staff grade C for the implementation of the initiatives under the Long-Term Housing Strategy Review, LC paper number CB141111314/07. Proposed creation of 1 supernumerary post of AO staff grade C for the implementation of the initiatives under the Long-Term Housing Strategy Review. Mr. Pascott will continue to be present at the meeting, and other members, Ms. Agnes Wong, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing.
And seeks members' support for a proposal to create a supernumerary post of Administrative Officer Staff Grade C in the Strategy Division of Housing Department with effect from the 1st of April of next year for 2 years to cope with the increasing workload relating to the implementation of the recommendations arising from the Long-Term Housing Strategy Review. As members are aware, the Government initiated the LTHS review in September of this year. The Long-Term Housing Strategy Steering Committee has drawn up a consultation document and carried out a 3-month public consultation exercise from September of this year. Following the consultation exercise, a report summarising the views collected will be prepared by the Steering Committee for submission to the Government in consideration and formulation of the long-term housing strategy and relevant policy measures. Currently, the Strategy Division has set up a long-term housing strategy subdivision providing Secretariat support to the Steering Committee. When the subdivision was set up in September of 2012, a supernumerary assistant director post was created for 6 months to head the subdivision. Following the lapse of the post in March of this year, as a stopgap arrangement, the existing Principal Assistant Secretary Housing Policy Support, Assistant Director Policy Support, was asked to take on the additional duties to provide support to the Steering Committee in its deliberations and the subsequent arrangements relating to the public consultation exercise on a temporary basis. Following the receipt of the consultation report, Government will formulate the long-term housing strategy, taking into account all of the views received. This work and the subsequent tasks will be coordinated by the Transport and Housing Bureau to kickstart the relevant policy reviews and map out the implementation framework on initiatives to be implemented in a timely manner. As seen from the very divergent views received during the public consultation period, and on a wide range of issues, the related policy reviews will unfortunately be complex, involving controversial issues on which the government needs to strike a careful balance. In order to make progress on the new policy, it's inevitable that further consultation with stakeholders and the wider community will be necessary. To ensure that these important tasks can be carried out efficiently and effectively, there is a need to have in place a dedicated team, headed by an officer with appropriate experience and seniority, to perform the duties on a full-time basis. Now, we have carefully considered whether there are other alternatives, but have come to the conclusion that extending the stopgap arrangement to absorb for the Permanent Assistant Secretary policy support to absorb the additional work involved is simply not sustainable, given both the vast amount of work involved and his existing duties. Asking other assistant directors in the Housing Department to absorb or share these duties is also not viable, as all of them are already fully stretched, do not have spare capacity to take on this substantial and substantive task. So we're seeking members' support for the creation of the proposed supernumerary AO staff grade C post for 2 years to undertake the relevant works arising from the LTHS review. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
頭先呢，我已經呢係得到大家同意啦，係。
Just now, I already, with the support of members, announced that the meeting will be extended by 15 minutes. So on this agenda item, 3 minutes questions and answers included Dr. Fernando Cheung and Mr. Tony Chair and Mr. Albert Chan. 3 so far. Oh, 4. So Dr. Fernando Cheung, please. Thank you, Chairman. This post will have a tenure of 2 years for formulating the policy framework for the long-term housing strategy and also to monitor the work progress. 1 directorate post together with 8 non-directorate posts, and the commitment is close to 100 million. So at present it's 90 million. And normally, what we imagine is when the administration rolls out a new policy, a large proportion of work will be on policy formulation, consultation, and then implementation, or at least the preparation of policy paper. And then planning will have to be carried out. Usually, the plan will be handed back over to the relevant government bureaus and departments for implementation. So I don't understand the concept. Why is it that when you should have had the heaviest workload, you didn't need this supernumerary post? And at that time, there was a short stopgap arrangement for 9 months, just a temporary post. And through redeployment of staff internally to complete the most important part of work. However, now that all the work has been completed, you're saying that you need a top-rank official for the remaining work. And if you talk about long-term, it should be at least 10 years. So why is it that you're only asking for a supernumerary post of 2 years?
I must remind members, the first part was the work carried out by the steering committee. Our work in terms of the department was to support them and provide information. I had a working group, which I chaired, comprising all of the relevant departments. So we structured it to allow the steering committee to take the lead. But now it comes back to government, and it's for excuse me, it's for government to try and take forward all of the recommendations, and they cover a huge range of different things, from land supply, from increasing production, from dealing with subdivided units and all of those very important issues, as well as issues that have been thrown up during the consultation exercise. So the work for government is really starting now. Before that, it's been led by the steering committee, and that's the way it's been structured. So what we've got to do is make sure that we're capable of taking forward those recommendations that will come out of both the consultation exercise and their work over the last years, and implement them quickly. That's why we want it for 2 years to get it done quickly.
Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I don't quite understand either. I mean, before that, perhaps support was necessary for the Long-Term Housing Strategy Steering Committee, and as Mr. Padgett just said, that temporary post was ended in 2013 in March. And what is the way forward for consultation? We don't know the way ahead. So why is the post only for a period of 2 years? Does it mean that policies will be formulated first before the department will follow up on them, or otherwise? Because after the consultation exercise, recommendations will be given to the administration. So my question is, why is the post set up now?
Correct, because of course it must be implemented by the departments. It must be, for example, a series of recommendations for the Housing Authority to consider the quota and point system, to consider the well-off tenant system. Those will be taken forward by the department. But there are wider issues that cover across government, where we need to make sure that we can drive the relevant departments to implement those issues. But we need, first of all, to get the right policies, because there's a series of recommendations that are going to come out of this exercise which deal with, for example, we need to deal with perhaps regulation of subdivided units. That's a policy issue which needs to be taken forward, but the implementation, the executive part, will be taken forward by the departments.
Chairman, I don't understand, because we're still in the consultation period. For the final recommendations, we're still not sure. So, is it too early to establish some posts? You may still be short of manpower. Maybe after the public consultation ends, you don't really know how much manpower you need.
Public consultation ends today, actually. And you can already see, because we're working on the basis of the recommendations that are set out in the steering committee's report. On top of that, the public consultation exercise has given us the feedback from the community to those recommendations. What we now need to do is marry the two, but we still need to take forward the recommendations. We know that work has to be taken forward. And the purpose of the consultation exercise is to make sure that when we do the policy development, we're aware of the community interest and the priorities that the community is setting. But regardless of that work on the policy development, we already know what has to be done. So that's why we're coming now.
So, Chairman, does it mean that between now and the next April, it will be left vacant?
Is that the steering committee will consider the feedback that they've received. They will then make their final recommendations to the government for the government to respond to. And it is that next stage that we're really talking about. First, how does the government respond? And then what does the government actually do in terms of policy development and then implementation? And that's why we need this work. In terms of the timing, we expect that the steering committee will have a series of meetings during December and January to finalise their consideration of the feedback, and then they will submit their report in the first quarter of next year. That's why we're looking for the start of this post at the beginning of April, once we've got the report in place and government's initial feedback on that report. So the timing is carefully considered.
Mr. Albert Chan. Chairman, I oppose this paper. in recent years, you can see that the situation of creation of directorate posts are really worrying. You have principal officials, undersecretaries, political assistants, and also the creation of posts for directors of a number of departments, including the Marine Department, and also the another regular post for the East Kowloon Development Office. It's record high. We've never seen the creation of so many top-ranked posts within such a short period of time before. The over-expansion is really worrying. I don't know whether it's because of the accountability system, because of the incompetence of C.Y. Leung's administration. Civil servants need to create more posts to give him support. On housing supply, Mr. Pascal, you know very well that per year it's just 48,000. Making up a total of 480,000 for 10 years. So it's just half the number during C.H. Tong's era. And back then, you didn't have so much experience, you didn't have good coordination among departments, and yet the target of 85,000 was taken forward back then. What about now? You have no new thinking. Why is it you need new posts? Does it mean that the principal officials don't know how to do their jobs? If you talk about how production target, back then it was 85,000, more than a double. So you can see, Chairman, that's how government departments and bureaus work. You put the blame on tight manpower, and what about those principal officials in the past? How did they manage? So, Mr. Pascal, why is it that with the same establishment, 85,000 could be reached in the past?
We reduced our establishment on the production following to the decisions in 2002. We lost, and we've explained this previously, we lost about 1,000-something staff at the time, including directorate officers. And frankly, we're still way below the numbers that we had at that time. We're something like 800, 900 posts below what we had at that time. So really, it's a very different context. The other point here is none of these are principal official posts. These are practical posts needed to do the job, because my staff are really facing a huge amount of pressure from all of the initiatives that have been coming out and the incredible additional pressure that we've...
Well,
give us a table to compare the staff provision.
In fact, we've done
at the peak of the housing provision, probably back in the early 1990s, as compared to now, so that we can have a comparison of staff provision.
Sure.
During these two periods,
sure,
so that we will have a better understanding of the actual situation.
In fact, Mr. Chairman, we did exactly that the last time we came to the panel, so we can easily give you that paper. It's no problem.
Well, it's close to 4:45, and a number of Dr. Low hasn't spoken. If members agree, I will extend the meeting until I finish this item. Dr. Low Kwok, I need to declare, first of all, that I'm a member of the HABC and HATC, the Building Committee and Tender Committee. This post, according to the paper, doesn't only provide support in for the long-term housing strategy steering committee in the public consultation exercise. According to item 2 in Annex A, it states that the post will conduct policy reviews and to implement initiatives agreed by the government arising from the LTHS review. Implementing initiatives might be a long-term task, and this post will only have a tenure of 2 years. But if we are really to implement initiatives, definitely it will go beyond 2 years. So does it mean that during actual implementation of policies after their formulation, staff of the Housing Authority and the Housing Department will be engaged? And another thing is in the list of items for discussion, there is also an item on creation of posts or of directorate posts, 3 of them in the Housing Department for coping with the additional workload arising from the new public housing production targets. So this paper will be submitted in due course. Has it to do with the professional grade, like engineers, directorate posts for professional disciplines? PS?
The 2 things. For the implementation side, it will involve not just the Housing Authority, but a number of different departments, depending on the outcome. It might involve Rating and Valuation Department. It may involve fire services, buildings, etc. So we will have to work to coordinate that response. That's why this central figure is so important. And yes, the other posts that we're seeking are technical posts related to the construction program, and they're going to be dealing specifically with engineering. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's engineering and architects and I think surveyors, the 3. But we'll give you the detail next year. But those are purely technical posts, not AO posts.
Chairman, I support this proposal to create 1 supernumerary post of AO staff grade C to provide support to the long-term housing strategy review. Dr. Fernando Cheung, second round, please be brief.
I have read all the documents. I have heard all the answers from the HA, but I have to say I am not convinced about this, the necessity of the creation of this position and the other positions apart from the AO staff grade C1. I'm not convinced, and they will have to go to before they go to the Finance Committee, they have to go to the Human Resources Committee, the ESC. Have you finished? Yes, I have. Mr. Chairman, of course, the panel will make the final decision, but for the questions I have asked, perhaps there should be a composite answer concerning the comparison between staffing needs and the production, and go back to history to see what was the proportion and ratio before we can come up with a conclusion and recommend this to the ESC.
There are 2 things I must clarify. We will provide the information, but what we're talking about here really relates as much to the policy side as to the production side. So the production figures, and the other thing to remember is that back in 2002, when the Bureau and the Department were combined, there were a number of posts that were cut from the Bureau. So effectively, we're also down on the Bureau side. So I will try and give you a full picture so that members have a clear view as to where we are today compared to where we were before.
Well, so we wait until those figures before we make a decision. In
that case, we won't make the decision until the next meeting, and we don't have a quorum anyway here. Well, we will have to get more information from the HA, Mr. Chairman, as to what each of the posts would be responsible. If it's just about the strategy, the framework and the implementation, I mean, what exactly are we talking about? This is a 200 million budget, and this is the superstructure, so to speak, the senior posts, and the junior posts, as far as I know, are working flat out. And if we have no transparency as to what exactly the terms of reference and the details of the work, it's hard for us to make a decision. I note all your opinions. We have come to the time for the end of the meeting. Would the department please go back and give us more information and come back again to our next meeting, supply further information and address the questions as raised by the members. So 3 agenda items plus this one. We have 4 for the next meeting. Any other business? No? This ends the meeting. Thank you very much for coming.